Welcome to another video. Purple Political Talk here. And today we're going to be looking at my updated 2020 presidential election prediction. And we're going to look at a couple different things today. So, we have recent polling that changes the map in a lot of places. And we have our last prediction before someone else is attached to the Biden ticket. So, why is this important? Right now, the Biden campaign just has to worry about Joe Biden. However, with a VP on the ticket and having the full ticket on, they have to focus on that person as well. Not only are they going to help the ticket, they might potentially hurt it as well. So, this is going to be our last prediction where we talk about solely Biden versus Trump, not factoring VPs, because I think we should have our VP pick for Biden anywhere in the next couple of days, as the Democratic National Convention will be held in the next couple of days. So, let's get started by filling in our Democratic safe states. At this point, the Democrats do have a major advantage, like I've been saying for many videos, in the fact that they currently do have their base and their safe states pretty much solid. They're locked down. They don't need to invest a lot more money into these states. And this is not good for the Republican Party because they're having to spend a lot of money on their quote-unquote safe states. And some recent polls from yesterday, we're seeing some data that's not encouraging for Republicans in many places. Where Donald Trump's not leading by the 15, 20, 30-point margins he was leading in some of these places anymore. Where now he's only leading by less than 15%, which makes it contested. We're going to take a look at all those states in this election prediction. So, that's going to be one big issue that the Republican Party is going to have. They're going to have to, one, find out where they can actually count on a safe state, because they could completely forget about a state and say, on election day, why is this a lot closer? And remember, at the end of the day, how close it is doesn't really matter as long as you win. So, I don't think, that's going to be the problem for the Republican Party. However, their problem will come when it comes to the future. If those states got super close now, what doesn't stop them from going a lot further into the Democratic column in the future? So this is our starting off map, and we're gonna start talking about the Republican Party and their likely states, because here is where a lot of those states that I was talking about will fall under. So states like Montana, Alaska, Mississippi, South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, all these different states, as well as Nebraska's first congressional district. All these states have been and districts have been solidly red for the last couple of years at least. Some of these states just flipping to the Republican Party, consistently since probably after the 1992 elections, and Bill Clinton's raid of the South. So right now, what's going on in a lot of these different states? One, Donald Trump's not the most popular person. Two, minority turnout will be high. And three, that's essentially all it is. Because realistically speaking, in a lot of these Republican states, another thing I forgot to mention, they're very moderate in a lot of these places compared to other Republican states. So I'm going to take a look at each state individually and each district individually, I guess in this case, and talk about them. So first, out of the state of Alaska, this is a state that's been solidly Republican. Usually 10 to 30%. It falls. It's just somewhere in that bracket. And this time around, we're seeing some trends when it comes to polling data, money raised, and all these different things in the state of Alaska that are not favoring Donald Trump. So, at this point, when it comes to the Senate race in that state, we're seeing Al Grassley, the Democratic challenger to Dan Sullivan. And maybe that momentum will rise and move through with Donald Trump. However, I don't think that's why this race is close. It's not the momentum from that Senate race. Rather, it's more of this state has a big third-party presence. So, since they have a lot of third parties, most third parties currently are against Trump. So, a lot of those Alaskan voters that might have voted for the Green Party, or which actually takes a lot of votes in Alaska, or even the Libertarian Party, who maybe would not want to vote for Trump. Especially with the Libertarian Party, it wouldn't be such a shocker if they went for Trump, but a lot of them are not voted Libertarian because they didn't want to vote for Trump. It wouldn't be surprising if a lot of those would just flipped for Biden and lowered the margin in this race. Right now, I feel like that state, before any craziness from VP and actually the nitty-gritty campaigning, I think right now it falls 10 points. When it comes to the state of Montana, that's our next state. This state is a state where, they're not completely afraid about differently down ballot and stuff. And we're seeing that with their Senate races in the past. However, I mean, there is a lot of, there's an incoming wave of new people moving to Montana. There is a big growth in the state's economy. And right now, I mean, there's a popular Democrat in office, and I mean, that's just going to help Joe Biden. The Senate race is going to help out Joe Biden. And I mean, at this point, Joe Biden has good campaigning and all these different things in some of these areas that, and maybe taking away some of the voters. In Montana, one thing we must consider is that most of the Republicans that vote Republican, a lot of them are very moderated, and that's why we've seen people like Steve Bullock come out of this state, and John Tester, very moderate Democrats like Joe Biden, maybe a little bit more to the right. However, these people would appeal in the state of Montana, and considering how Donald Trump's not popular everywhere, I mean, Montana could easily go down less than 15 points. But I think less than 15, but more than 10, somewhere in that margin. And next is Nebraska's first congressional district. So this morning when I was doing the poll video with you guys, I was a little shocked when I saw this poll with Nebraska's first congressional district. I questioned it at first because I didn't know if it was a typo or something. And it ended up being a real poll on Nebraska's first congressional district. I get confused now because, I mean, I've been saying Nebraska's second for such a long time. But out of Nebraska's first congressional district, why would this be, could be contested? Why? Well, essentially what's going on here. This district right here is kind of the suburbs, partially of the two biggest cities in Nebraska, in Omaha and Lincoln. So those two cities are going to be pretty much suburbanized here, as well as the big rural areas of the state. So I mean, the poll I saw today had Biden losing by 3, so Trump plus 3. Again, it was a Democratic insider poll, so I don't think it's going to be that close. However, that shows us that the state could be competitive. So I would say it could go to the Republican Party, so plus 13 maybe points. I mean, and this is a district to watch in the future just because it has a lot of suburbs. So that's something else to watch. Next, the state of Missouri. I mean, the state of Missouri has been a state that realistically hasn't been kind of completely ruled out to be a swing state, but it's no longer as consistently as it used to be. In 2008, this was a very close state. It narrowly went for John McCain. In 2016, there was a period of time where Missouri was a swing state. And, I mean, right now, it's not completely a swing state. However, Donald Trump's margins have started to narrow down. And we have a lot of minorities here, especially in the two big areas in Kansas City and St. Louis, which have a lot of African-American population, which will vote for Biden, as well as the suburban voters in these areas, like I mentioned, that again will probably lean for Biden or narrowly go to Trump. And since we have these places where margins are certainly going down, we could see something here that a lot of people are going to see the state probably going to be a lot closer than it currently is. So I honestly feel like Donald Trump could carry this by around 10 or more points. However, excitement with St. Louis and other parts of the state, I can see this state going like by 10 points to for Trump. Again, it's excitement, and in this case, it's more of the moderates and minorities coming out to vote. In Mississippi and South Carolina, it's pretty much minorities. So, I mean, we essentially have here 6 and 9 electoral votes that will be crucial for the Republicans going on from here. And these states, I mean, haven't been the most solid. I mean, we've seen districts flip, and we have very big bases in Mississippi in this district that's like around right here, and in the two districts in South Carolina. So those two states, they have a lot of African Americans. That is really what is pushing up the Democrats' chances. And it's just African American turnout will be sky high this election. And considering that the chances of a black VP are very high, I mean, that shows that the chances of these seats at least narrowing down are pretty high. So I feel like these states, especially South Carolina, will be somewhat closer to that in the past. South Carolina, I could see it going anywhere between even 8 to 15%. And Mississippi, maybe by a little more, so like more like 13 to 15%. So I mean, that's what I see happening in these states. Of course, we're still far from election day, so we don't know if Republican bases are going to be excited, if Democrats lose their support. We don't know all these things from right now. But just as a state of things right now, things are constantly changing. The last state on the Republican likely column is another state that has been recently moved to this column, and this is the state of Kentucky. A recent Quinnipiac poll, I am thinking it was a Quinnipiac poll. If not, it was PPP poll. I know that's a little bit more Democratic, but it had Durham ahead in Kentucky only +8. That is not good, considering that this is a somewhat solid red state, at least at the presidential level. We have a very big Democratic movement here with a lot of more progressive voters moving into the area of Kentucky, and you have a lot of support from other Democrats. Joe Biden might be even able to write Amy McGrath's coattail in the state of Kentucky. And since we had a poll that had +8, I haven't looked at all polling data again. There's not much because it's not a swing state. So a +8 lead for Donald Trump is not great. I see this state going by a lead by probably like 13 or 15 points. However, I wanted to mention it because I saw it and I wanted to bring it up to you guys. So those are all our Republican likely states, and pretty much all these states are states that went from being solidly Republican to being likely Republican. So now we're going to move on to our Democratic likely states, and these states have a lot. So Nevada, Colorado are included, Virginia, New Hampshire, as well. I would say at this point, pretty much a lot of the Rust Belt at this point is in the likely column. I would honestly be interested to see a couple things. Because, in the Rust Belt, it's not what it seems. So, right now, I'm going to put Wisconsin, I would say, even in the likely column for the Republican Party. This far out, we have Biden leading in polls in all of these places by at least 5 points. And, the Democrats swept the midterms. They have a lot of support right now. And these polls are constantly showing Biden ahead +3, +4, +5, +6, even +7. And I saw polls from Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Biden +13. So these polls, all the data that we do have, should indicate that these states should be in the likely column for the Democratic Party. So right now, I would say that out of these states, there's a couple things we must look at, but I'm going to go state by state and talking about each individual thing. So, out of the state of Nevada, we have a pretty much wrapped up race for the Democratic Party. As Joe Biden is a moderate Democrat. Is he going to be the most popular with Latinos? Probably not. However, just because Nevada has been somewhat hard hit economically by COVID-19, I could honestly this state voting somewhat larger margin that they did for Hillary Clinton, enough to put it in the likely margin. Colorado, again, it's a big thing here that there's a lot of progressives. Will the Bernie Bros affect Joe Biden's performance? Probably. However, I think that Joe Biden should be able to win here by anywhere from around, I would say, maybe 7 points at max right now. It could be more, but considering how we are right now, especially the Democrats are, I don't see them carrying the state by a huge margin. Now the Rust Belt. So this is an area that I was talking about before when I first filled it in. It's very interesting because we have polling data showing Biden consistently ahead. However, I've heard and I've seen kind of the mainstream media going through some rallies and stuff like that. I see a lot of excitement for Trump. Again, that's not the only thing, because you could have a rally in the middle of nowhere where there's no one. It could seem like a lot of people. However, I honestly feel like these seats will definitely narrow down. And surprisingly, Michigan is the closest out of all the Rust Belt states. I know a lot of people were saying, no, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are going to be closer. But the polling data shows Michigan being a lot more closer. Is it by a landslide? Probably not. It's 4 points compared to 6 points and 5 points, which isn't a lot. But the fact that Donald Trump has been able to kind of narrow down the margin here a little bit more where it used to be is pretty good. The last two states, Virginia and New Hampshire, I feel like these two have although they might be very different when it comes to demographics, they ideally, I think, they think of the same things. Virginia and New Hampshire have this thing like I just mentioned, and it's mostly of they both act suburban, and even though New Hampshire is not suburban, because they realistically don't have any big cities nearby, but they have the same ideals, and I think a moderate Democrat would do really good here. We historically, moderate Democrats have done good in these states, and we've seen that. And right now, Joe Biden is a moderate Democrat, and that's really going to help him right there. So, at this point, that state should be pretty solid. Those two states should be pretty solid for the Democratic Party. Going around, by what I would say, around anywhere from maybe 7 to 10 points. So that's going to be very good considering these states were very close in 2016. So those are all our likely states for both the Democrats and the Republican Party. And right now it stands at 125 for the Republicans and 278 for the Democrats. So now that we're done with our likely states, we have to move on to our lean states. And let's start with the Democratic lean states. This point, the Democrats are racking up a lot of states. And realistically, by only winning the safe and likely states at this point, they win the election. So they have other places where they can get some votes. In this case, Arizona, North Carolina, Florida. And these are places where the Democrats shouldn't be too worried of gaining support because they have a base there. However, especially in North Carolina and Florida, it's more of a push over your base. Flip enough amount of borders, which I will discuss when we discuss each individual state, and also the state of or the district of Nebraska's second. So we're going to talk about these states individually. Let's start with Nebraska's first. So, I mean, this district, I would say for a long time was leaning Trump. Because, I mean, most people weren't excited to vote for Biden. But with reason Black Lives Matter, with reason all these different things about COVID-19 affecting Donald Trump and his campaign, I feel like a lot of voters are flipping towards Biden when it comes to this district. And I feel like this district is nearly going to go to Biden. But, I mean, not as narrow as a tilt margin. But, I mean, we've seen polls that have consistently shown Biden ahead by 2-3 points, but I'm going to expect it. I'm going to expect it to go by at least 1.5 to 3 points. Again, is it a huge margin of victory? No, because it's in the lead margin. However, since Donald Trump was leading here consistently for a long time, we could have seen that happen. So the next state is the state of Arizona. I mean, this is a state where it's mostly suburbs, and it's mostly very moderate people. Donald Trump is a lot more radicalized than Joe Biden. Not saying that Donald Trump's radical or anything, but just in the way of how far they are in their beliefs, Joe Biden's a lot more centered. And that's really going to resonate with the voters in the state of Arizona because they really like moderates there. We've seen people like John McCain succeed here. We've seen people like Kirsten succeed here. Why? Essentially because they're moderates. And these people really like to vote for Joe Biden, or people like Joe Biden, because they are moderate. I mean, comparing it to someone like Trump that is a little bit more radical, I would say, with his ideas. I think a lot of the Arizonan voters, especially in Maricopa County, where it really does matter to win, are going to start voting for Biden. Where does Donald Trump gain his support, though? In the southern counties of Arizona. So these are the border counties, which, I mean, this really does hurt the Democrats somehow because a lot of the people that live in the border say that Donald Trump's idea with the border wall and things like that really do help. And we can see some of the trends happening. So, comparing the Arizona map from 2016 to 2018 midterms, Democrats gained in the suburbs, aka Maricopa County, and they lost support in the southern counties. Otherwise, the counties like Yuma County, which really have a lot of Republican vote now, considering that county used to be somewhat swing, and now it's more leaning to the Republican Party, and it's because immigration and border issues that are affecting that district, or those counties, that do have a big basket of votes for the Republican Party. So, I mean, is it completely over for Trump? No. Because at the end of the day, Maricopa County is a county that, realistically, if you lose it by a small margin, it's not going to affect you as much if you can carry the rest of the state by somewhat of a larger margin. However, it's going to be a challenge for Trump now, and I feel like this state might easily go for the Democrats by around maybe 2 to 5 points. Florida and North Carolina, I feel like in the same boat, I would say, somewhat southern states. They have kind of the same types of populations, a little bit different in Florida, but essentially what's going on here, Democrats and Republicans have always fought in these states. They have their solid bases. However, now people are fighting for the independent vote and getting their bases to turn out. Florida, we have kind of a big thing where Latinos are leaning towards Trump. We have the suburban voters, which are turning a lot more Republican. While you also have a big amount of the elder vote, which is a big part of Floridan voters, as well as the inner cities and kind of those areas coming out for the Democrats. So on one hand, we have that. Well, I mean, that's what we have essentially. So at the end of the day, what's going on here? We're going to have to see whether African American and Latino turnout for Biden it overtakes the older turnout for Trump. If Donald Trump underperforms this older turnout, which he's projected to, that's going to be a big blow for him when it comes to this election. However, I mean, things can change quickly. And at this time, according to the polls and other things that I've been seeing around the state with demographics and stuff like that, I would say that Trump is leading by a 2 to 3 point margin, nothing more like that. So, I mean, a lot of people say that, or especially the polls, they show Biden ahead by 5, 6, 7% in some polls, and I just don't see it. However, I mean, I think Biden is leading, however, not by that much. When it comes to the state of North Carolina, same thing. It's pretty much your bases that you're looking forward to, as well as bringing them out. I mean, for the Democrats, it's very crucially important to bring out the African-American communities in the state of North Carolina, as well as bring up the new independent vote, which is just moving from areas like tech companies are moving to North Carolina. North Carolina has a very big growing economy, and a lot of college-educated voters that are influxing the state. So, Biden could win here by 2 to 3%, which might be one of the larger margins of victories in recent history. And I mean, honestly, with African-American turnout somewhat high this time around, and the influx of college-educated voters into the state, wouldn't be that surprising if Joe Biden's able to win the state of North Carolina by around 3 to 5%. So, those are all the lean states for the Democrats at this time. Now, going on to our Republican lean states, the Republican Party, they have some places where they're leading, and they're kind of probably going to win by 2 to 3 points like the Democrats won in their lean states. However, I mean, some of these states are looking like they're going to be a lot closer than others. So, let's start with the state of Texas. Texas is a state that usually is thought of as a kind of the newest swing state in the bloc. Right now, I mean, it's a state that is going to be crucial for the Republicans to win. However, I mean, although Biden was leading in some polls and they're getting support in certain areas of the state, I currently think the Republicans will narrowly, or at least by a narrowly to the past standards, hold on to the state of Texas by maybe 1.5 points. Similar margin, I would say, than the Ted Cruz Beto O'Rourke race, maybe just a little bit more for the Republican Party. And I feel like a lean margin here fits very well. I mean, and essentially what's going to happen here is all going to come down to how much Latinos vote and how much the suburbs of big areas like Dallas and Houston flip. So that's going to be one of the biggest indicators we're going to see in the state of Texas. And I guess we'll just have to stay tuned. With Iowa, we're going to have a similar thing to the next state, which is Georgia, in the sense that there's a lot of big, solidly Republican bases here. We have a lot of the rural vote, which usually tends to vote Republican, and most of Iowa is rural. So, I mean, as of right now, I would honestly say that the Republican Party is going to have a major benefit here when it comes to the state of Iowa. And I would say that because they're going to have a somewhat more Republican base they could rely on. I mean, since there are so many rural votes, the Democrats will have to flip around 5% of votes. So, that's going to be a lot of votes for them. And essentially, they're going to have to carry the inner cities and the bigger cities and suburbs by a larger margin. Obama was able to do it, but again, Obama's Obama, and I think his campaign will be different than Biden's. However, I mean, is it impossible? Maybe not. But I feel like Donald Trump's leading here, and I think he will lead here until the election is over. Although Biden could gain some polls and stuff like that, I honestly feel like the Democrats do not have as big of a chance winning here. When it comes to Georgia, here's the thing. Very unfortunate, but voter suppression is going to be a thing. Especially because, I mean, you have a Republican governor who's been known to be a voter suppressor in Brian Kemp. So, first of all, that's not painting good signs for the Democrats. And considering that, I mean, at this point in time, yes, African-American turnout will be high. With voter suppression, it's not going to be as high as it could be. As well as the simple fact that you have a lot of the establishment Republican voters that they're going to be picking an option. Do I vote for a Democrat or do I vote for Trump? I think like a lot of those voters are going to just decide to vote for Trump. And essentially it's because, again, big rural bases that are really constantly voting Republican. And I mean, historically they've been Republican. So, I mean, like in Iowa, I don't doubt that those voters might turn out for Trump. However, the race is going to narrow down, but I mean, also with voter suppression, that's not painting a good picture for the Democrats in the state of Georgia. And the last lean state for both the Democrats and the Republicans is the state of Maine's 2nd Congressional District. I honestly feel like Donald Trump will carry this district, although some polls have him behind. I would say he would carry this because, one, COVID-19 hasn't been a big issue in this district. I mean, yeah, you've had a lot of cases. I mean, not a lot of cases compared to the rest of the nation, but some cases. However, it wasn't as hard hit because, I mean, since it's so rural and everything's so spread apart, we won't see something as big here. So, I mean, also, I mean, this district is usually very different to the rest of the Northeast in many different ways because it's a lot more conservative. And Donald Trump won here in 2016. Joe Biden could narrow down the margin. I would say Donald Trump would win here by around 1%. Still enough to put in the lean margin. However, Joe Biden does have a chance. So those are all our lean states. Let's go on to our tilt states. So at this point, we have the state of Ohio. This is a hard state to characterize because there's many different things that are affecting this race. And again, what are we thinking of here? One, if the Democrats want to win here, they would have to flip around 5% of votes, which again, in a big state like Ohio, not that simple. And I mean, they're essentially going to have to flip what? Is it, if my math is correct, they're going to have to flip at least 50,000 votes. Is it the end of the world? Maybe not, but I mean, it's probably a little more. I haven't looked at the complete numbers of Ohio. I'm going to have to look into that. But still, I think it's going to be hard for the Democrats. And I feel like the Republican Party will narrowly hold on to the state of Ohio and be the closest state in 2020. I feel like, honestly, Donald Trump is going to have the rural areas of Ohio go out for him and vote. However, when it comes to the big Democratic areas like Columbus, like parts of Cincinnati, and most importantly, Cleveland for the Democratic Party, those areas I think will turn out for Joe Biden, which is going to be good for him and his campaign. So, I mean, at this point in time, many different things are happening all across the nation. With Biden's VP pick essentially coming up in the next couple of days, that's going to become a factor in the election. So, I mean, things change constantly, so don't take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. And I would just say that in the next couple of weeks, we're going to start seeing the heavy campaigning start. And the pre-debates and all these different things that come with campaigning, that's going to start in the next week. And we're going to start seeing a lot more battles between the both campaigns. So this is my prediction: 204 electoral votes for the Republicans, 334 electoral votes for the Democrats. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please give it a huge thumbs up, like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to get notified when I post my next video. Hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.